Welcome to the NFLNU podcast for Friday, September 20-something. I don't have the date right in front of me, and now I feel bad. I'm your host, Hayden Vassar, and we got a jam-packed show for you today. We got game previews, we got news, we got a game recap. We got it all today. And just plenty of stuff to get to. Yeah, no normal sign-in like we usually do. Oh, it's September 27th. I just had my notes backwards. There we go. We got it. September 27th. So first things first, I think we should get to the Thursday Night Football recap of last night's game between the Eagles and Packers. And wow, that was a fun game. I told you guys a week ago, you sit through bad Thursday Night Football to get good Thursday Night Football. And we got really great Thursday Night Football last night. Eagles win this one 34-27. Aaron Rodgers gets picked off in the end zone with 24 seconds left to seal a win for Philadelphia. On a night where it felt like almost everything went right for Philly, in contrast to the first 3 weeks of their schedule where it felt like everything that could go wrong is going wrong with Philly. Philly improves to 2-2. They pull to 500, and Green Bay takes their first loss on the season to fall to 3-1. It was just a fun, high-scoring game. I really didn't think we were going to get something like this, especially with Green Bay's defense, who just did not show up at all last night. I mean, Green Bay's defense failed in basically every single category last night. Last night, watching the game, I was, watching Green Bay's defense just get run over on every single run play. And I thought, is their run defense bad? I kept hearing the announcers say they're bad, but I thought Green Bay's defense on a whole was good. And then I went and looked at, ESPN stats, and Green Bay's run defense is actually one of the worst in the league. Coming into that game, before last night, they were one of the worst in the league. Their run defense is teams that have a worse run defense than Green Bay. I'm talking about teams like the Giants and the Dolphins. Like, Green Bay's run defense is that bad. It's bottom third in the league. It's atrociously bad. And it got flat out exposed last night. Philadelphia had 176 total rushing yards, most of that going to Jordan Howard, who had a breakout game. He had 15 rushes for 87 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he caught 3 passes for 28 yards and a touchdown. Philadelphia's entire offense was running through the run game. And Green Bay's defense had no answer. And you could argue they can be bad on run defense as long as the rest of the defense is solid. But the rest of the defense didn't do anything. They did not sack Carson Wentz once in this game, even though Green Bay was one of the better pass rush defenses in the league coming into this game. They also got no turnovers, another area where the defense has really shined. Like I said, it was just a categorical failure on every aspect of Mike Pettine's defense that we had sat here and praised for the first few weeks of the season. And you got to give it to Philly. Philadelphia showed up to play in this game. This was the first time all season you could say Philadelphia was in a complete game. Because in every game this season, at some point in the first half, they're down big. At some point. They trailed at every game at halftime. And this was the first game all season where they led at halftime. Not just led, they had a lead. The pretty sizable one until Aaron Rodgers came back with that last-second touchdown in the first half. They were about to go into halftime with a 7-point lead. And I honestly started getting nervous in the first half watching it because when Green Bay went up 10-0, I think late in the first quarter or early second quarter, I already thought the game was going to get out of hand because of that defense. Oh, here we go. Philadelphia starting slow again. Here we go again. And then the second quarter just turned into a scoring spree. It started out 10-0, and then the score at halftime was 21-20 Philadelphia. I mean, it was crazy. Speaking of Philadelphia's offense, they were insanely happy to have Alshon Jeffrey back for the first time since week 2. Caught 3 catches, 38 yards, and a touchdown. Carson Wentz didn't have the great night statistically. He went 16 of 27 for 160 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. One to Jordan Howard, one to Jeffrey, and then one to Dallas Goedert, the tight end. But I just find it interesting that everybody's now praising Carson Wentz after his performance last night when, honestly, this was probably his least best game so far this season. He's looked better in the first 3 games when they were losing than he did last night when they were winning. And everybody was giving him grief on social media saying, oh, he's not that good of a quarterback. Well, you know what? He is, but everybody's going to give him a pass because he won last night. I just find it just so weird how the media personalities can be like that sometimes. I mean, Carson Wentz could throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, but because his wide receivers drop a couple passes, he's overrated. But when he goes out and barely throws for 160 yards, all of a sudden he's still good again. It just doesn't make sense to me. Either he is or he isn't. I think Carson Wentz is good. I think he is very good, and the NFC East is blessed to have 2 really good quarterbacks right now in Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz. But speaking of quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers went off last night. He proved that he still has it, and any people that were doubting him over the first 3 weeks of the Matt LaFleur offense because he hadn't been putting up numbers, yeah, y'all can sit down and shut up now. Aaron Rodgers went 34 of 53 in passing for 422 yards. That was basically the entirety of the Green Bay offense was Aaron Rodgers. 422 yards, 2 touchdowns, that interception in the end zone at the end of the game, got sacked once, and from that sack he fumbled the ball once. But here's an even more interesting tidbit about Aaron Rodgers last night that I think can illustrate the Green Bay offensive struggle for the entire game. Aaron Rodgers had 5 rushes for 46 yards. He was Green Bay's leading rusher in last night's game. The running game was flat out ineffective for the Packers last night, and it forced them to rely on Aaron Rodgers for the majority of the game. Devontae Adams, the Green Bay wide receiver, had 10 catches for 180 yards, set a career high in yardage, but he left early in the fourth quarter due to a turf toe injury, and he's seeing a specialist, I think it's today, to see how long he could be out for. But Aaron Rodgers literally had to do it all. Green Bay had 499 total offensive yards, and like I said, Rodgers had 422 of those. So it was all on Aaron Rodgers last night. But watching Green Bay in the second half, not just in the second half, in the fourth quarter, they get in the red zone, not just in the red zone, they get into the 5-yard line in the fourth quarter. Early in the fourth quarter, they get to the 1-yard line, and they run 4 straight passing plays, all incompletions. At least one of them should have been caught by Jimmy Graham, but he dropped it. But that's not the point. You get to the 1-yard line and you start passing the ball, I have serious questions about your offense. I don't care that the running backs were averaging like 1 yard a carry. Well, you're on the 1-yard line anyway, so why not run it? I'm just saying, you get down to the 1-yard line and you do 4 straight passing plays and you get nothing from it. I hate it when I see offenses just they're just trying to overcomplicate things. Just keep it simple. Is it that hard? Really? Is it really that hard to just run 1 yard? I actually think it's harder to get to the 1-yard line and then suddenly break out this weird play-action bootleg scramble pass that everybody just wants to do. Just run the ball. It's really not that hard. And then, late in the game, basically with the game on the line, Green Bay gets into inside the 5-yard line again, and they run nothing but pass plays. And it gets tipped and intercepted. Imagine what would happen if they had just ran the ball. They probably could have tied the game. But no, they want to get fancy with it and try to throw it. And I think you could really blame a lot of that on Matt LaFleur, because it felt like the inability to run the ball the entire game made them second guess themselves. Because Matt LaFleur's offensive identity, they want to run the ball in Green Bay. And it had been working great the first few weeks, but when it got shut down, they kind of panicked and just told Rodgers to just sling it. And when they got to the red zone inside the 5-yard line, it just fell apart completely for the Packers. And I really think you could blame the loss on that. You had 2 trips inside the 5-yard line in the fourth quarter in a 7-point game, and you came away with no points both times. That is how you lose a football game. It just really confuses me. But going back to the Eagles for a second, this was an absolutely massive win for them. This wasn't a must-win situation, But looking at their upcoming schedule, 3 of their next 4 games are on the road. We talked about it in the last podcast. They play the Jets next week in Philadelphia, but after that, they have a road trip to Minnesota, then a road trip to Dallas, and then a road trip to the Bills. This was a big game to help, cushion a blow in case they take a loss in that road trip. This was an absolutely massive win for Philadelphia to pull a 2-2 right now. And for Green Bay, like we mentioned on the last podcast, their offense, it wasn't good coming into this game, but you saw that Rodgers still has enough to really take over an offense and really take over a game. But now I have questions about that defense that I didn't think I'd be asking. It's Thursday night, and I don't normally put a lot of stock in the Thursday night games, but Green Bay's defense made me question a lot about them. I guess the way to beat the Packers is just run. Their run defense is so atrocious that they just can't stop the run, apparently. So when they play games against teams like, I guess you could say the Cowboys, are the Packers just going to roll over and just let Ezekiel Elliott rush for like 200 yards? Is that what it's going to be? I think if you're a running team and you have the Packers on your schedule, I think the Eagles just handed you a blueprint on how to take down this team. Use multiple running backs and just keep running it because they can't stop you. Now, it is only week 4 and it is Thursday Night Football, like I said, so nobody's really playing their best. But still, I think we saw how to crack the code of this Packers defense last night. So it'll be interesting to see going forward with teams that have solid running games what they're going to do against this Packers defense. All right, once again, Eagles win this one, move to 2-2. Win this one 34-27. We're going to move on to news for a quick second. Get a couple of these news bits in. We got an actual lot to get to in news. First of all, Melvin Gordon ended his holdout with the Chargers. What was that, Wednesday? No, he ended it Thursday. Reported to the team Thursday. He's been in practice. He's been working with the team. But he is not eligible to play this Sunday against the Dolphins. He'll be eligible to play next weekend when the Chargers take on Denver. There's a nice little lull in the schedule for the Chargers. Good little get-right games. They got Dolphins and Broncos coming up, 2 winless teams right now who can't seem to figure anything out. And Melvin Gordon is coming back at a good time when this offense is already one of the better ones in the league. The Chargers are averaging over 400 offensive yards a game, and you just throw Melvin Gordon into that, you're about to kick that offense into another level. We know Melvin Gordon is a good running back. He's not an elite running back, but he's still a really, really good running back. So we're going to see how Melvin Gordon does when he comes back in and plays. The Chargers head coach said that he wants to more ease Gordon back into playing time, wants to see where his stamina's at and all that stuff, because he hadn't played since last January. Yeah, that was the last time he suited up and played. And we're getting into October now, so he's probably got some rust on him. It would have been nice, to play against a Miami team that's really downtrodden right now. Be a nice little knock a lot of the rust off for that game, but he'll be back next week, and I bet the Chargers are very happy to have him back. A very banged-up Chargers team gets a nice little shot in the arm. See how they look. We'll get to the Chargers a bit later when we talk about their game against the Dolphins, but I bet they're very happy to have Melvin Gordon back. Moving on to the AFC South, the Jalen Ramsey saga has been taking a couple weird turns since the last time we talked on Tuesday. So we initially talked about Jalen Ramsey, who said he had called into the Jaguars facility, said he wouldn't be there because he had the flu. Then the next day, after we reported that, Jalen Ramsey said, I have a back injury and can't come in. So it went from a flu to a back injury in the span of about 24 hours. And it just felt kind of weird. It was either a weird bunch of coincidences or he just doesn't want to come in. Then the next day after that, on Thursday, the Jaguars released a statement saying that Jalen Ramsey isn't going to be with the team for a while because he had flown home to Nashville to be with his pregnant wife for the birth of their daughter. And you can't knock a man for being with his family. Family should absolutely come first before football. It's just been a weird 3 days where it feels like every day something new comes out about Jalen Ramsey and the Jaguars in their little standoff. And we had talked about maybe things were going to cool down and maybe Jalen Ramsey was going to stick around in Jacksonville. Well, after the Jaguars released a statement saying he wasn't going to be with the team, a couple hours later on Thursday night, or was it Thursday or Wednesday night, Jalen Ramsey was apparently on a podcast and said that he still wants to be traded. He made it clear he still wants to be traded. And he alluded to the fact that he doesn't know if he's suited up for the last time as a Jacksonville Jaguar. But his trade demand is apparently still standing. And remember, the Jaguars are apparently in the camp of, we don't want to trade Jalen Ramsey no matter what, which is probably why their asking price is 2 first-round picks. Because they don't think anybody's going to be crazy enough to offer that much. And once again, we'll keep you guys updated on this one, but it just feels like this is just going to keep going and going to the point where it gets to a point where it's become so untenable that they just have to get rid of it. Where Jalen Ramsey is getting to the point where he just doesn't want to be there so badly that it's going to become miserable for everybody involved to keep him. And if that means that the Jaguars are going to lower their asking price to maybe a first-round pick and maybe a 5th or 6th thrown in there and maybe a player, maybe that's what it's going to take to get him to move. But as of right now, the Jags still do not want to trade Jalen Ramsey. And that's okay. You have to keep players like this, but it just sucks that it's gotten to this place where he's basically telling them, I want out right now. And you can't seem to make one of your star players happy. I mean, he's not demanding money, really. He just wants out. He's not happy there. So you can't really argue that you should just pay him. He just doesn't want to be there. There's a massive difference in that. And once again, we'll keep you guys updated on this if anything more develops from it. Jalen Ramsey will not play this weekend because he's, back home at Nashville. And Doug Marrone, the head coach in Jacksonville, did not say when or if Jalen Ramsey's going to be back with the team. He just said he's taking a leave of absence to be with his wife. So we'll keep an eye on if Ramsey suits up once again to be a Jacksonville Jaguar. And then a last bit of news, we had a trade this week. I don't know if a lot of people saw this one. The Seahawks trade tight end Nick Vannett to the Steelers for a 2020 5th-round draft pick. The Steelers' current starting tight end Vance McDonald left their Week 3 game against the 49ers with a shoulder injury. And if anybody was watching that game, you saw him hanging out on the sideline with a sling on his arm. There's no real timetable for his return, and it sounds like he's going to miss at least the Monday night game against the Bengals, which is going to explain this trade. So the Steelers can get some tight end, at least some tight end depth on the roster before that Monday night game. And the Steelers need all the help they can get. Their offense just feels so lost this entire season. Not just since Mason Rudolph took over, but just this entire season they feel lost. And we'll see how much playing time Nick Vannett can get against the Bengals team, and basically a must-win game for both teams. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the podcast. That's all we have for news right now. We're going to move on to the preview of the rest of Week 4, starting with the early 1 o'clock games. And then, as usual, I'll tell you 3 games that I think you should be watching this week if you get a chance. We got some interesting ones this week. I got a game for you that if you're really into slow defensive football and a lot of running game, I got a game for you. If you're into 2 teams that are probably going to throw the kitchen sink at each other in a desperate attempt to win, I've got a game for you. So it's a real mixed bag of stuff we got going on this weekend in the NFL. But we're going to first start off with the 1-2 Browns going all the way to Baltimore to take on the 2-1 Ravens. Nice little AFC North divisional matchup. As we mentioned last Tuesday on the podcast towards the end, I didn't get a lot of time to expand on it because we were really running late, but the Browns offense is flat out inept right now. They're 24th in total offense right now, and they're scoring, their points per game average is right around there as well, floating around the 24, 25. I think as high as 22 is at some places I've seen. It's just flat out inept right now. And there's not a real thing you could point to say this is the one thing that's wrong with this team. I've seen a lot of hate thrown at Baker Mayfield lately, and you can't really say it's entirely his fault, even though he has made some bad decisions these last couple of games. Yes, he has. That offensive line is doing him no favors. You got a bit of an inconsistent running game, and when all of that factors in, it also means that your tremendous wide receiver group in Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. cannot get any production going. And you also have David Njoku, your starting tight end, who's still out for a couple weeks with a broken wrist. I mean, the only thing on this Browns team that is working right now is their defense. That is the only thing that's working right now. They're the number 10 overall total defense in the league. Surprisingly, they're averaging 15 yards per game in total defense. I'm truly stunned that, we're 4 weeks in and the Browns defense is the best part of this team, and it's not even close. Think about that for a minute. All of this offseason hype, and you have a secondary that in their last game had to start basically all new players. And they're the best part of this team by a long shot. It's just truly incredible just how far the Browns have fallen offensively. And there's a lot you can point to on that Browns offense, from the offensive line to the inconsistent play by their quarterback to really not all their running game to very questionable play calling by Freddie Kitchens. And I have heard back in the offseason there was talk that maybe Fred Kitchens and their offensive coordinator, who I believe is Todd Monken, which is who I believe it is, maybe aren't always getting along, so to say. But so far, that offense is just non-existent in Cleveland. And they desperately need something good right now. They got upcoming games against, like, the Patriots coming up. They need something right now. Because I promise you, if they lose this game and then go out and get droned by the Patriots in a couple weeks, things are going to get ugly fast for these Cleveland Browns. But moving on to the Browns' opponent for this game, the Ravens have the number one statistical offense in the league right now. They're number one in total offense with 511.7 yards per game. Lamar Jackson in that offense is legit. And yeah, they came up a bit short in Kansas City last week, but I think that might be more of a detriment for the Browns than anything. I think the Ravens are probably going to come into this game a little peed off because of what happened last week with Kansas City. Not that they got screwed or anything, but, the Ravens were flying really high, and they got humbled by Kansas City. So they're going to come out and take out their aggression on a Browns team that's kind of woeless right now. Like I said, the Ravens' offense is one of the best in the league right now. They're at least top 5 in basically every single offensive category so far this season. Their defense, on the other hand, is a little suspect. They're right around middle of the pack right now for their defense, floating around 17 or 16th, depending on what site you're looking at. But for this game, as long as... I just think the Ravens are just going to come in and start putting up points, and the Browns aren't going to know what to do. This Browns team is truly struggling just to get close to 20 points a game. They are struggling mightily just to do that. And that just feels so offensive considering the talent they have on that offense and how good it looked last year, to just come out and just drop the ball so violently like this. It just feels wrong. But you got to wonder, if the Ravens score like 3 first-half touchdowns, you got to wonder if that's game right there. This Browns offense just cannot figure it out. They haven't figured it out through the first 3 weeks, and I just don't see them just suddenly clicking all of a sudden against a divisional rival that's one of the best teams in the league right now. I just don't see it. And that's why I've got the Ravens winning this one. I think the Ravens come in and put up a bunch of points and just start going up and down the field on this defense that's going to get tired out pretty quickly because their offense can't do anything. And that's sad. I want the Browns to be good. The league... Trust me when I say this, the league is a much better place when the Browns are good. Things are more exciting. It feels more fresh. I don't want the Browns to fail, but it just feels like that's where this is going. Once again, I got the Ravens winning this one. Moving on, the 1-2 Chargers going all the way to Miami to take on the Dolphins, the 0-3 winless Dolphins. We talked about the Chargers a couple minutes ago when we talked about Melvin Gordon. And like I said earlier, this is a get-right game for LA, for the Chargers. The Chargers are a top 10 offense in basically every category, in passing offense, in total offense, in rushing offense. They are a top-tier offense right now, even though a lot of people don't really see that because they're 1-2. And Melvin Gordon coming back next week is really going to help with that. Austin Eckler is still going to be a solid weapon in that offense, but he's going to revert back to what he has been for most of the time he's been in LA. More of a receiving back than a straight-up running back. With Melvin Gordon coming back and taking the top spot back. And like I mentioned earlier, the Chargers are averaging over 400 yards a game so far through the first 3 weeks. And you know how many yards per game the Dolphins' defense is giving up per game? They're averaging 499.3 yards a game giving up on defense. They are the worst defense in the league right now, in case you couldn't tell by watching them. So for the Chargers, the Dolphins may get frisky early, like they did against Dallas, but don't read too much into that. The Dolphins team itself is trying their best to win games. The players and the coaches, they're trying their best to win. It's the front office that's tanking. It's the front office and that general manager and ownership that's trading away players. It's putting this team in bad position to lose. Those players and coaches are trying their hardest to win every single week. So if they come out and it's a bit of a close game at halftime, I wouldn't read too much into that because the final score may have the Chargers winning by like 21 points. But like I said, this is a get-right game for LA. And for Chargers fans, I wonder how nervous they are coming into this game. Because it is the Dolphins, and they are the worst team in the league, and they are on track to have the number 1 overall draft pick. But for LA, just hold on to a second-half lead. They have blown a second-half lead in every single game so far this season. And if they blow one against the Dolphins in the fourth quarter, I think it might be panic time for that defense. I mean, in 2 out of the 3 games, the Chargers have blown double-digit leads. I mean, that defense has been very suspect in the second half. And, you could also blame it on their offense not really getting the most production in second-half games, especially against Houston last week and the Colts in week 1. But still, sometimes in defenses, you just got to take over and hold out. So if the Chargers blow a second-half lead, especially a double-digit lead against the Dolphins, I would be very concerned if I'm a Chargers fan. But I think the Chargers take care of business in the second half. I think they pull it all together, and they win in convincing fashion in Miami and send the Dolphins to 0-4. Moving on to our next one, our first matchup of undefeated teams for the weekend. We got the 3-0 Chiefs going to Detroit to take on the 2-0-1 Lions. Lions still undefeated after 3 weeks. Who would have thought we'd seen that, huh? Yeah, I know. Exciting. Before we get into this game, I want to take you guys back to the long, long time ago of 2016. Yeah, I know. Super long time ago. 2016 was the last time that current Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes played in a dome stadium. That dome stadium was AT&T Stadium, home of the Dallas Cowboys. Patrick Mahomes, playing for his college team, Texas Tech, took on the Baylor Bears. In that game, Patrick Mahomes threw for 586 yards, 586, yes, you heard that correctly, and 6 touchdowns in a win over Baylor. That was the last time Patrick Mahomes played in a dome stadium. And yeah, he played in a dome in preseason of last year against the Saints. I don't really count that, though. It's preseason. Nobody really cares about that. This Sunday, against the Lions, who play in a dome, Patrick Mahomes probably won't throw for 586 yards and 6 touchdowns. But he's going to come pretty close. The Chiefs are averaging what, like... They're Mahomes is averaging like 3 to 4 touchdowns a game and 350 to 400 passing yards almost every single game this season. And I just don't see a Lions defense that's really feeling themselves right now coming out and getting all over Patrick and this defense. I just don't see it. I want the Lions to be good. It makes the league more interesting when suddenly a team that won 6 games last year is suddenly knocking off everybody in their way. I do think that makes the league more fun, but I just think Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense is just way too much to handle for any team right now that's not named the Patriots. But this will be a good litmus test for the Lions because we're trying to figure out how good the Lions are. And if I remember correctly, the Chiefs' run defense is also not that great, statistically speaking. So that could really be a solid boost for a Lions team that's been trying to run the ball these first few weeks, but has found little to no success with Kerryon Johnson. Another player for the Lions offensively that could really step up in this game is T.J. Hawkinson, their rookie tight end, who had the phenomenal debut week 1 against the Cardinals. He had like 130 yards and a touchdown in that game, and just has been a non-factor in the 2 weeks since that. So if the Lions are going to, keep in this game, they're going to need production from Kerryon Johnson. They're going to need production from T.J. Hawkinson. They're going to need production from Kenny Golladay, their wide receiver. They're going to need help from everything because, realistically speaking, the Lions could seriously have to score on every single drive. That's not to say the Lions' defense is bad, but the Chiefs can literally score at will. If you give them the ball on their own 20-yard line, they can score in one play in 10 seconds. They can do it to anybody. And for a Lions team that's still figuring themselves out offensively, I know Matthew Stafford's been playing pretty well the first couple weeks. It just feels like the Lions are still a work in progress offensively, and I just don't know if they're ready for a game where they have to score 35 points to still be in it in the fourth quarter. But I've got the Chiefs winning this one. I think the Chiefs offense is just going to be way too much. And we'll see who the new Chiefs wide receiver is this week, Last week it was Mecole Hardman. We'll see who it is this week. Is Sammy Watkins going to suddenly reemerge after his amazing week 1 and then no-show appearance the last 2 weeks? It feels like every week it's a new Chiefs wide receiver, getting almost 100 yards and a touchdown on a crazy 80-yard pass play. Once again, I got the Chiefs winning that one. Like I said, it's a good litmus test for the Lions. I don't think they're going to win, but we'll see how good they are. Moving on to our next game, the 1-2 Carolina Panthers going all the way to Houston to take on the 2-1 Texans. And my main question for Carolina is, will the Kyle Allen show continue for the Carolina offense? I mean, their offense just looked drastically different with Kyle Allen calling the plays last week against Arizona. And yes, I know Arizona is one of the worst defenses in the league. I get that. But it just looked so different. They had their first passing touchdown last week, and out of 4 passing touchdowns that Kyle Allen threw. I mean, he just looked great against a terrible defense, and the Texans, while not, the greatest defense in the world, they're not horrific like the Cardinals are. And like I mentioned last week, if Kyle Allen continues to impress, I'd like to think the odds of Cam Newton not getting a job back are fairly high. I love Cam Newton. I'm a diehard Cam Newton fan, and I have been since he came into the league. But if Kyle Allen suddenly gets a hot hand, you got to wonder if this coaching staff, who may or may not be on the hot seat come the end of the year if things don't shake out too well, if they're willing to ride a hot hand that could maybe get them into the playoffs. Now, think about this. Kyle Allen comes out this week 4 against the Texans, and throws 4 interceptions, and then we put this all to bed because Cam Newton's guaranteed his job back. That could also happen. Or he could come out and throw 4 more touchdowns and lead the Panthers to another win. That could also happen. We've seen stranger things in this league. Nobody thought Dak Prescott was going to take Tony Romo's job until he did. Nobody thought Colin Kaepernick was going to take Alex Smith's job until he did. So we've seen stranger things happen in this league. It is completely possible that by the time Cam Newton comes back in like a month or two, he doesn't have a starting job anymore because Kyle Allen has played so well. Or Kyle Allen has played so horrifically bad that Cam Newton is guaranteed his job. Both of those things are fully capable of happening. But we'll just keep an eye on Kyle Allen, see how he does. And like I said, there really is no timetable for Cam Newton to come back right now. There still isn't. Panthers haven't provided one, and because of how Kyle Allen played last week, I bet the Panthers are saying, take your time, get 100% healthy. Because if Kyle Allen had come out last week and just dropped a complete bomb and failed horrifically, they would have probably rushed him back when he wasn't ready. But now he can take his time and get healthy. I know it was one game against a horrifically bad defense, and I cannot say that enough because the Cardinals are a horrifically bad defense. It'll just be interesting to see how this goes week to week with Kyle Allen's performance. But not just Kyle Allen and that offense stepped up last week. The Carolina defense stepped up last week. I mean, they had 8 sacks last week against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, and they're going against a team that, for the most part of the year, has not been good at protecting Deshaun Watson. Last week against the Chargers, they only gave up 2 sacks, and that's like a great day for the Texans O-line that they only gave up 2 sacks. The Carolina defense has been quietly very good so far. They're 4th in yards allowed in the league at 295.3 yards a game, and 3rd in sacks with 12. So they're going to come after Deshaun Watson. And the style that he plays, where he's a bit of a mobile quarterback and he scrambles in the pocket a bit, it's going to invite more sacks. It just is. But the Texans, their key to winning this game, they just need to protect Deshaun. Protect him as much as you can, and he's going to give you a shot to win. He just is. If it's late in the game and the score's, at least somewhat close, he's going to give you a chance. For this game, though, I just really believe in the Panthers' defense right now, especially after that mugging that they performed on Kyler Murray. And I want to see what Kyle Allen does, but I'll take the Panthers in this one. I just really believe in their defense right now, and I think defense is something that carries over week to week more easily than an offensive performance. I am fully expecting Kyle Allen to not throw 4 touchdowns this week. Let me just say that clear after I went on like a minute rant about him. I am expecting the offense to maybe tamper down a bit, but I'll take the Panthers in this one. I'm a firm believer in that defense right now, and we'll see if they can bottleneck Christian McCaffrey. The Texans defense can, because like I said a couple of weeks ago, I still am of the opinion that if you can bottleneck Christian McCaffrey and force him to be a non-factor, that offense slows to a crawl. Now, I said that when Cam Newton was still their starting quarterback and they weren't getting a whole lot from him, but now you have a guy who can throw downfield and get the wide receivers involved and get them in the end zone. So we'll see if that still holds true and if the Texans can slow down Christian McCaffrey. But I got the Panthers in this one. But I wouldn't be stunned if the Texans win it. Moving on to our first real watch of the weekend that I think people should be watching. And before I say this game, I know people are going to roll their eyes when I say it, but just hear me out when I talk about it. The 3-0 Pats are going to Buffalo to take on the also undefeated Buffalo Bills in an AFC East divisional rivalry. This is the first time in, I think, years where I've actually looked forward to an AFC East rivalry game. Because for the most part, it's been like a 12-win Patriots team taking on like a 5-win Jets or Bills team. That's what it's been the last couple of years. It's just been non-existent football. And while the Bills have been, getting together some wins against maybe some not-so-great opponents, the Patriots have been loudly declaring they're the best team in the league these first 3 weeks. I mean, the Patriots' defense are the number 1 defense in yards allowed. They've given up 199 yards average per game. They're tied for first in sacks at 13, and they're in the top 5 in every offensive category in rushing and passing and total offense. I mean, if I remember correctly, they're in the top 3 in most of those as well. I mean, their offense is flat out clicking right now in September, when normally they've been a team that struggled early in the season. They're looking like they could win the Super Bowl right now. And even though they've been dominant, they really haven't played anybody. I mean, look at their opponents. Their opponents have combined for a record of 0-9 so far this season. They played the Steelers in Week 1, then they played the Dolphins, and then last week they played the Jets, who have Luke Falk at quarterback. So they really haven't been tested at all yet. And the Bills are not an offense that are going to beat the doors off anybody. They just aren't. Like I mentioned in the last podcast, they just seem like a team that's gonna top out at about 21 points offensively. But their defense is stingy good. They're number 5 in total defense at 299.7 yards per game. They're number 5. Not just in defense, but in offense. They're the number 5 overall rushing offense with 151.3 yards per game. And I just think that the Bills team we're gonna find out how good the Bills are. When I was writing this stuff last night and doing my research for the show, I thought about what would constitute a good enough feeling for the Bills in this game. Like, if it's still a competitive game in the fourth quarter, I think the Bills can hang their hat on that. I really think they could. Because this team won like 6 games last year, and then they're in a close fourth quarter game with the best team in the league. I think that's enough to hang your hat on for this Bills team that has not had a lot of things to hang their hat on these last 20 years. This, like we talked about with the Lions, this is another good litmus test for the Bills to find out how good they are. Make no mistake when I'm talking about this. I truly believe the Patriots are winning this game. But if the Bills are keeping this competitive, at least towards the end of the second half, and aren't getting the doors beaten off of them, I think the Bills can take that in stride. Now, there's no such thing as a moral victory. I'm of the firm opinion that moral victories are overrated, but I think if you can hang in there and prove that your worth against a really great team like the Pats, I think it could go a long way. But here's a very depressing stat for the Bills that's going to get even worse after Sunday. Tom Brady is 15-2 at Buffalo Stadium. 15-2. Career record. He only plays there once a year because, they're division rivals, so they play twice a year, and he has to go there once a year. He's 15-2. Tom Brady has more wins in Buffalo Stadium than any Bills starting quarterback since 2001. Let that sink in for a moment. Tom Brady, with 15 wins, has more wins than any Bills quarterback in almost 20 years in the Bills Stadium. The next closest is, I cannot stress how ironic this is, Drew Bledsoe with 14 wins, the guy that Tom Brady replaced in New England. After that, it's Tyrod Taylor at 13. I just can't get over the amount of ineptitude at quarterback that over that almost 20 years you can't get a guy to win 15 or more games at quarterback. That's insane. And Tom Brady's going to be 16-2 after this game because I got the Pats winning. But we're going to see how good the Bills are in this game. Now, if the Bills go out and get whacked and lose like 45-10, we're gonna have a very different conversation come Tuesday. But I've got the Pats in this one. All right, moving on. We got the 1-2 Raiders continuing their very long road stint, taking on the 2-1 Colts in Indianapolis. If you've been watching Colts football the first couple weeks, you would know that their bread and butter has been the running game with Marlon Mack. They've been one of the better rushing offenses in the league with him. But if you watch their game against Atlanta, you would know that the Colts show that they can beat you with more than just running the football. that can throw the football too. And they got weapons all over that offense with T.Y. Hilton, who's a little banged up with a quad injury. We don't know if he's going to play in this game. And Eric Ebron, their tight end, who caught like 14 touchdown passes last year. They can beat you in multiple ways. And speaking of how banged up the Colts are, Malik Hooker, their safety, is still out for a couple of weeks after he tore his meniscus. Darius Leonard, their all-pro linebacker, still out with a concussion. We don't know if he's going to play. And like I mentioned, T.Y. Hilton, we don't know if he's going to play with a quad. So the Colts are banged up right now, and the Raiders are coming into town almost at the perfect time to play them with a lot of their star players out. But for the poor Raiders, it feels like week one, their lone win on the season was so long ago, doesn't it? When they just manhandled the Broncos and everybody was feeling good about the Raiders because they just got rid of Brown and then won on that Monday night game. But that just feels so long ago because then they were on the receiving end of a blowout by Kansas City, and then they were on the receiving end of a blowout by the Vikings last week. It just feels so long ago since they were last in a competitive game. And did you know that the Raiders haven't won in Indianapolis since 2001? I think they're like 0-5 or 0-6 on the road since then in Indianapolis. And the Raiders are in the middle of this super long road stint where they're not going to have another home game until November. So, yeah, the Raiders are already in a tough position to begin with, but now they got to go to a Colts team that's really feeling themselves right now. And that's why I got the Colts winning this one. I just think the Raiders are just in a weird funk right now, and they're about to get another hard beating. I don't think they're going to get blown out by any means by this Colts team. But I think it's going to be a bit more on the one-sided kind of victories for the Colts. I'm really not feeling this Raiders team right now. They got a lot of problems, I think. Defensively, they've just kind of given up these last 2 weeks. And offensively, they just don't strike you as a team that can score a lot of points. All right, moving on. We got the 0-3 Washington football team taking on the 1-2 New York Giants in New York. Danny Dimes' first home game as a Giant after that crazy, insane, awesome debut he had last week against Tampa Bay, where he won it in the final minute with that 7-yard scramble. If you listened Tuesday to the last Tuesday show, we talked about Saquon Barkley is going to be out for like 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain. And that means Wayne Gallman, their backup running back, is going to be seeing a lot more reps for the Giants. And Wayne Gallman isn't Saquon Barkley by any imagination, but I think he's a good backup who's going to see a lot more time. And Daniel Jones' mobility is really going to help them out. Like we mentioned last week on the podcast, last Tuesday, his mobility is not the kind of guy where he's going to rush for 100 yards a game, but if the middle of the field is open on like a 3rd and 5, a 3rd and 7, he can take off and get that. That's the kind of mobility he has, and that can really open up an offense where the threat of him running is now there. That's something the Giants didn't have with Eli, and that's not a dig on Eli by any means. He was never, ever a mobile quarterback, especially when he was young. It's just a new dimension for this Giants offense to mess with for Pat Shurmur, their head coach. And looking at the Washington football team and their quarterback, let's call it issues, I guess, because that's what everybody wants to call it. Case Keenum is a little banged up. He had a foot injury on Monday night. He was at practice on Thursday yesterday, and they're saying he's going to be good to go, but you have to wonder how healthy is that foot, coming into this game. And will he be able to finish the game? The good news for Washington is you have Colt McCoy, who's apparently 100% healthy, their backup quarterback, who's healthy for the first time this season, and just in case something happens. But for some reason, it just feels like a lot of people are clamoring for Dwayne Haskins to start right now. Their first-round draft pick back in April, they took Haskins at like 15th overall, and it just sounds like he's not ready. I mean, we heard that all through the preseason, and if you watched any of the preseason, you saw that he still wasn't ready to start. And I thought he was going to start the moment they drafted him. I thought he would be ready to go week one, and he just wasn't. And that's okay. I think we've become so used to quarterbacks, if you're drafted in the first round, you're basically starting week one. That's how it's felt the last couple of years, that You got to remember, a couple of years ago, it wasn't so crazy that a guy gets drafted in the first round and then sits on the bench for a year or two. And that might be what Dwayne Haskins does. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Case Keenum has played well for this team if you exclude the Monday night game. He had thrown for over 300 yards in each of the first 2 games and thrown for multiple touchdowns. But they just ran into a brick wall on Monday night against Chicago and nobody played well. But the main issue for the Washington football team is not their offense, it's their defense. Their defense is one of the worst in the league. It's in the bottom third right now. And putting in Dwayne Haskins isn't going to fix the fact that you really can't generate a pass rush and your secondary can't seem to cover anybody. It's not going to change that fact. And it's also not going to fix the fact that your run game is just not really there for Washington. But speaking of bad defenses, the Giants also have a horrific defense. Washington is ranked 26th in total defense, giving up over 400 yards a game. The Giants are ranked 31st in total defense. 31st. Giving up an average of 460.3 yards per game. So this is a matchup of just atrocious defenses. So this might be a very high-scoring affair. This might be a game where the winner is determined by who gets the ball last. But I just feel like the Giants are just in a much better place right now than the Washington football team. I like Case Keenum. I think he's getting a bit too much hate right now. I like Scary Terry, the rookie wide receiver, who's really doing a really great job out there. A little underrated right now. But I just don't see this ending well right now for the Washington football team. And then they also have questions about their tight end position with Jordan Reed, who is still out with a concussion. And there were reports last week that his playing career might be done because he suffered so many concussions. I mean, that man has literally been out like at least a couple times every season the last couple of years because of a concussion. So the Washington football team has a lot going on right now, and it just feels like another thing that would go wrong for them in a very bad season right now. They go to the Meadowlands in New York and just lose like a 35-33 shootout to a rookie quarterback, and their defense just gets absolutely slaughtered. That's what it feels like. But like I said, it's a matchup of two horrific defenses, and somebody has to win. And I think it's whoever has the ball last. And I think the Giants are probably going to get the ball last. And Daniel Jones is going to have another great start for them. I don't think he's going to, light the world on fire like he did last week. But he'll do enough to win the game for the Giants. And I got the Giants winning this one. Moving on to our last of the early 1 o'clock games. The 1-2 Titans taking on the 1-2 Falcons in Atlanta. Man, it feels like forever since the last time we saw the Titans on that Thursday night game, like 13 days ago, where they just got absolutely slaughtered by the Jacksonville Jaguars. They gave up 9 sacks. Mariota looked horrific, and there were all these questions about whether they should start Ryan Tannehill. But for the Titans, they had the long break to really sit back and work on things and focus in on the Falcons team. My main question for the Titans, is your offense going to be watchable? Because these first couple weeks, it has not been watchable. You had week 1 where your defense really led the way in that mugging of the Browns, where you dominated and won 43 to 20 or something like that. Then you come out and drop a home game to a division rival in the Colts, where nobody really played well again. And then last week you get horrifically curb stomped by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And now you're going to Atlanta to take on a Falcons team that's very kind of week to week with what they're going to do, if they're going to be in it or not. But surprisingly enough, this game, the last game we talked about featured horrific defenses. This game features 2 top 10 defenses. The Titans have the number 6 total defense, giving up 308.7 yards a game. Atlanta's defense, surprisingly, is the number 7 overall defense, giving up 311.3 yards a game. And sneaky fact about the Titans have not given up a 100-yard receiving game to a receiver since I think it was week 14 of last season. So they've been keeping wide receivers in check, but they're really going to have their hands full in this game against the Falcons offense that's really slinging it with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. That's a two-headed monster that either one of those guys could get a 100-yard game easily. And we've seen it happen for both of them in a game. I think they had 100 yards against Philadelphia each. But for Atlanta, in my opinion, if Atlanta is going to win this game, they just need to grip it and rip it offensively. And by that, I mean just throw it downfield and start scoring points. I know this Titans defense is supposed to be good. They're one of the better pass rushing teams in the league. But what I'm saying is start putting up points, because I do not think this Titans offense can either come back or score points. They can't do either, in my opinion. Their reliance on Derrick Henry is so heavy that I think if they get down like 14 to like 3 at halftime, I think you can coast on that. Their offense is that bad. And that's why I have the Falcons winning this one. I got the Falcons pulling back to 500, and I just do not have any faith in Marcus Mariota in that offense right now. I don't have faith in any of their wide receivers. Their tight end Delaney Walker, in my opinion, is their only pass catcher that I have some faith in. Their offensive line is horrendous and one of the worst in the league. And it just feels like a game where they're going to come out and lay another egg offensively for the Titans. And once again, I got Atlanta winning this one. Moving on to our first of our late games, kicking off at 4, just a bit after 4 Eastern. Got the 1-2 Bucks traveling all the way to LA to take on the 3-0 Rams. For the Rams, I got to question their offense, because it just feels like the first week or two you could argue they're knocking off some rust offensively. But now we're coming into week 4 and we still got questions about them offensively. They still aren't, this big bad offense that we've gotten used to from the Rams. There have been miscommunication problems. Jared Goff has airmailed a couple passes, especially last week in Cleveland when he got picked off late in the fourth quarter that almost tied the game for the Browns. But for the Rams, you got to wonder when they're going to put it together offensively. I mean, right now I think they're like middle of the pack offensively. But the reason why they're winning games is because their defense has just been dominating. Aaron Donald and that defense has just been shutting people down and giving their offense plenty of chances to win the game. And looking at Tampa Bay, their opponent, you got to wonder what version of Tampa Bay and Jameis Winston we're going to get. Are we going to get the Jameis Winston from week 1 who throws a couple interceptions and costs his team the game? Or are we going to get Jameis Winston from last week, Jameis Winston and Mike Evans from last week, who put up this insane amount of yardage and should have won the game if Matthew Gay doesn't shank that kick against the Giants? This Tampa Bay team just feels like it's either all in or all out, depending on which week you're in. But a little note about the Tampa Bay defense that got dominated last week. Shaquille Barrett, in case you missed it on the Tuesday podcast, Shaquille Barrett has 8 sacks so far this season. He leads the league in 8 sacks through 3 weeks. He has more sacks than 17 other teams. This man has more sacks than entire teams have so far this season. He's been an absolute wrecking ball. And he's probably going to get after Jared Goff. They've had a bit of an issue protecting Goff these couple games. And he's had a bit of a fumbling issue. So if Shaquille Barrett gets in that backfield, just keep an eye out. But I think this game might get ugly fast. This is another game a lot like the Titans-Falcons, where we just mentioned that if the Rams can figure out their offensive woes and get up early, that might be it. I just don't have faith in this Tampa Bay offense week to week to score points consistently. And that's why I'm taking the Rams to win to stay undefeated. And I just want to see the Bucs do it consistently with Jameis Winston. I know it's only week 4, but we're so used to Jameis Winston, and you could argue Marcus Mariota as well, just being so inconsistent their entire careers in the NFL. You just don't know what you're going to get. And you want to see him pull it together because you see these flashes of brilliance every now and then. Like with Jameis Winston last week. He played so brilliantly. Outside, there was really only one play that entire game where you could say, what was he doing there? And that was the interception last week against the Giants. But and he gave them the chance to win late, and his kicker shanks it. You just, like I said, Jameis Winston and the Bucs and even the Titans and Mariota will have a game like that, and then they'll have 3 straight games where they just look horrendous offensively. So we'll see what we get from the Buccaneers and if they can continue to look good offensively. Moving on, we got the 2-1 Seahawks going all the way to Arizona to take on the winless 0-2-1 Cardinals. Both these quarterbacks have been letting it sling these first couple weeks. Outside of last week's game against the Panthers, Kyler Murray has been putting over 300 yards and a touchdown or 2 up in every single game. And Russell Wilson has been doing the same in every single game. I mean, last week he threw for like 400 yards, if I remember correctly. And that lost to the Saints. So I wonder if we're going to get a quarterback duel in the desert in this late game. Especially since the Cardinals' defense is just so atrociously bad. But specifically against tight ends, they're horrific. We mentioned it on the Tuesday podcast where every single tight end that they've played so far this season has had big days. TJ Hawkinson in week 1 against the Lions. Week 2, Mike or Mark Andrews, I always get his name mixed up, had a big day for Baltimore in week 2. And then week 3 last week, Greg Olsen, their tight end for Carolina, had a big week. So you got to wonder if Will Dissly, the Seahawks tight end, is going to have a big day. And looking at the Seahawks offense, you got to wonder, are they going to figure out this running game that's just kind of not been there through the first couple weeks when you thought it would be? Because that's what the Seahawks want to be. They want to be this run-first team. And Chris Carson, their starting running back, has been having fumbling issues these first couple weeks. And I think the Seahawks had like 107 total rushing yards last week, and Russell Wilson had like 52 of those. So the Seahawks need to figure out this running game, because I really don't want the Seahawks to go back to that time where Russell Wilson has to do it all offensively, because those really weren't fun times. That's how you wear a quarterback down, where he has to do every little thing offensively. But I just don't believe in this Cardinals team, especially that defense. That defense is atrociously bad. And I really think the only way the Cardinals win games is if they get into a shootout and they have the ball last. And that defense needs to be the kind of defense where they're holding teams to like 20 points so where that offense can score 24. Because that offense isn't the kind of offense to score a lot of points right now. It's still very much a work in progress, and they're improving week to week. You can see that. But it's just not there to where they can, score 35 points a game, because this defense is just letting everybody go. But I got the Seahawks winning this one. I think the Seahawks go to the desert, take care of business against a division rival, and move on to 3-1. A lot of questions still left about that Cardinals team, especially on offense. Moving on to our next game, we got the 1-2 Jags going to Denver to take on the 0-3 Broncos. Jaguars are really feeling themselves right now with Gardner Minshew. I really think that they've got a lot of confidence right now. DJ Chark has really come into his own and really woken up a wide receiver room that has been dead for a couple of years, in my opinion. And they also have a nice little complimentary weapon in D.D. Westbrook in that wide receiver room. I'm just really concerned about this Broncos offense, because this Jaguars defense, especially their defensive line, has been getting after quarterbacks so far this season. They're one of the better pass rushing teams. And if I remember correctly, the Broncos gave up like 6 sacks last week against Green Bay. And their offensive line has had blocking issues. You saw it in the game against Chicago, where they just got flag after flag after flag for holding calls because they just couldn't pass protect. And I really think the Jags defense is going to get after Joe Flacco in this game, because Joe Flacco, He's become a statue in the pocket. He doesn't roll out and move anymore. He's just a big statue. And that could be very bad for this Broncos offense that is already struggling. I mean, we knew coming into the year that the Broncos offense wasn't going to be a major threat. They were going to be a run offense that probably tops out at 17 to 18 points. And that was going to be okay because they expected their defense to take over. But right now, nobody is afraid of this Broncos defense. Nobody. Once again, they still have 0 sacks. 0. They could really use a couple in this game. And you got to wonder, this is another game like the Titans game we mentioned. If the Jaguars can score 20 points, you have to wonder if that's it. Because this Broncos offense was, first of all, not built to come back, and they were also not built to score bunches of points. And if the Jags can shut down their running game, which is what the Broncos offense is predicated on, it could be a wrap early. I've got the Jags winning this one. I just have no faith in that Broncos defense right now. And then you remember we talked about on Tuesday, we talked about some of the Broncos defensive players just openly questioning if they can do their jobs with the media. And then Von Miller had a press conference yesterday where he walked up, gave an opening statement, and then just immediately walked off. I mean, the press conference literally lasted like 10 minutes. I mean, not 10 minutes, 10 seconds. And I think that can attest to how much of a bad mood those players are in right now. They realize they're in bad shape, very bad shape. And this is, like we mentioned earlier, this is a cornered animal game for the Broncos. And they desperately need a win right now. They have not started out 0-4 since 1999. And that team finished as like a 6-win team. The Broncos know they need a win. I just don't think they get it, and that's why I've taken the Jags to win. Moving on to our last game in our 4 o'clock time slot. The 2-1 Vikings taking on the 2-1 Bears. And this is another game I think people should be watching because it looks like it's going to be a defensive slugfest. The Bears are right now an elite defense, and I think everybody's come to terms with the fact that maybe this defense could be as good as it was last year. And the Vikings have one of the better defenses in the league, too. We've talked about it relentlessly on this podcast that the Vikings' offensive game plan is to run the ball down your throat. They're the number 2 rushing offense with 193.7 rushing yards per game. And we've talked about the less the passing offense is involved for the Vikings, the better, which means the less Kirk Cousins does, the happier their head coach is for some odd reason. And with the Bears, I'm still not sold on their offense. I know they scored 31 points Monday night, but they also had a lot of short fields involved. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. I just really have not been sold on Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback. I think they have talent. I really do. I like Taylor Gabriel. I like Allen Robinson. I think their running backs are solid, even though they really haven't gotten much production this year. I just don't believe in Trubisky. And I think you have 2 passing offenses that really can't seem to get the job done, and 2 teams that are probably going to run the ball a lot. I just think that this is going to be a very ugly defensive game. And I think the team that scores is the first team to get to 14 points wins this game. This game is probably going to be one of those games where a team wins like 14-13. It's going to be one of those defensive games where it's just knockdown, smash mouth football, and some team by miracle scores a touchdown in the 4th quarter, and that's how the game's won, kind of thing. That's what I think is going to happen. But I'll take the Bears in this one. It's in Chicago. That Bears defense is so legitimate. I just have a hard time seeing how Dalvin Cook in that running game is just going to somehow score twice on them. Even though it feels like every week Dalvin Cook has some 65-yard touchdown run. I just don't see them rushing for a bunch of yards on this Bears defense. I still don't believe in the Trubisky-led offense, but I think Matt Nagy might cook up 1 or 2 things that could get them in the end zone. And I'll take the Bears in this one. But I do think this game is a coin flip, that either team could really win this game. All right, moving on to our Sunday night game. We got the 3-0 Cowboys traveling all the way to New Orleans to take on the 2-1 Saints. And we just got a little bit of news just now at this moment. Mari Cooper, the Cowboys wide receiver, was questionable for this game with a foot injury, if I remember correctly. But he has been ruled he's going to play just now. I saw the notification on my phone. He's ruled good to go for this game against New Orleans. And speaking of the Cowboys offense, they're averaging at least 31 points a game and over 450 total yards of offense per game. But like the Patriots, when we talked about them earlier, they've been beaten up on absolute nobodies. I mean, the Cowboys have combined against three teams that have gone 1-8 so far this season. They beat the Giants in Week 1 when they had Eli Manning. Then they beat the Washington football team, whose defense is atrocious, and then last week they beat the Dolphins. So this is the first time that they're playing a team that kind of has their stuff together, and the Saints. The Cowboys' defense is going to have to be a bit better, probably get a little bit better production from Jalen Smith at the linebacking position. But the Cowboys are just going to come out and try to score as many points as they can with Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott. That's their game plan. And they proved that they can do it however they want. They had 2 100-yard rushers last week, and they had Amari Cooper catch 2 touchdowns and almost have 100 receiving yards. They can beat you in the air. They can beat you on the ground. They can beat you in multiple ways. That's what the Cowboys are offensively. But for the Saints, what they need to do to win this game, they got to keep feeding up Alvin Kamara like they did last week against Seattle. He had like 150 total yards. Try to do it again. And for the Saints offensively with Teddy Bridgewater, you're going to have to take risks. He had like 170 passing yards last week. You're going to need more from him. You're going to have to take shots. You're going to have to take risks. And you're going to have to gamble with Sean Payton and Taysom Hill. You're just going to have to score points. Because the Saints were ultra conservative last week, in my opinion, in their game plan with Teddy Bridgewater. If you watched that game, I just think they were conservative. And like we mentioned it on Tuesday's podcast, I'm a bit concerned about the Saints' defense with lead. I know they've been able to rush the passer very well so far this season, and they're going to be going up against one of the better O-lines in the league and the Cowboys' offensive line. But like we mentioned on the podcast, I'm a bit concerned about that Saints defense, who gave up a lead late to Deshaun Watson in Week 1, and it took Drew Brees pulling off a clinical drive to win the game. You don't got Drew Brees anymore. And then last week against Seattle, the Saints got outscored 20-6 in the fourth quarter. The Saints defense gave up 20 points in the fourth quarter and almost allowed Russell Wilson to steal that game away from them. So, like I said, I'm just a bit concerned about that Saints defense late in the game if they have to protect the lead against Dallas, against an offense that's been just running over lesser teams so far. The Saints are a much better team than anybody Dallas has played so far, so this is a good little test to see how good the Cowboys are. But I'm taking Dallas in this one. I've got a bit too many questions about the Saints right now. Like I said, when Drew Brees went down, I thought the Saints could go 4-2 over the stretch. I thought they would lose the first 2 games with Teddy Bridgewater. I thought they would lose at Seattle, and I thought they would lose against Dallas. Well, they won at Seattle. All right, you proved me wrong. So, what are they going to do against Dallas? We're going to find out Sunday night. But I'll take the Cowboys on this one. All right, moving on to our last game. And this is the game I think people should be watching. The 0-3 Bengals at the 0-3 Steelers. I know that does not jump off the page at you, and you're probably thinking, why would I watch that? Here's why. This game is a cornered animal game. Both these teams are backed into a corner and desperately need a win. You start 0-4, your season's over. I think we can all agree on that. Both these teams are in a bad way right now. The Steelers are just lost offensively. Their passing game has been non-existent the entire year. They have no running game. James Conner has basically disappeared these first couple weeks. And he had that horrific fumble late in the game last week against the 49ers that really cost them the game. And you could argue that the Steelers' offense has really only shown up for one half of football, and that was the second half against Seattle in Week 2 when Mason Rudolph replaced Big Ben. Other than that, the Steelers' offense has been a absolute no-show this season. I mean, as we mentioned on Tuesday's podcast, Mason Rudolph only completed 2 passes past the line of scrimmage in the game against the 49ers. You can't do that and expect to win in this league. You just can't. You have to press the ball downfield. You have to take shots. And he did take shots, but they were mostly incomplete. You got to get these receivers involved downfield. And it just feels like right now the Steelers have no offense. And their defense isn't much better. Their defense is just giving up chunk after chunk of big plays to teams, especially on the ground. I mean, for teams with running games, the Steelers are looking like a pretty hefty get right now if you're playing against them. And that's great for the Bengals because Joe Mixon finally broke out last week. I mean, he had I think it was over 100 total yards. He had a bunch of rushing yards, caught a receiving touchdown. So Joe Mixon's finally getting involved back in this offense that's so pass heavy for the Bengals. And going off of that, for the Bengals, we know their offensive identity right now is just to throw the ball downfield. And A.J. Green is still probably a week or two away from coming back. But for the Bengals, is John Ross going to make a reappearance in this offense? That's what I'm just curious because he was their main weapon the first 2 weeks, getting over 100 yards in both games. And then he was just a no-show last week. So if they're going to beat the Steelers team, they're going to need all hands on deck right now. And like we mentioned with Joe Mixon, he's going to have to stay productive for this team. He's going to have to get a fair amount of rushing yards and get involved in that passing game and just really help out as much as possible. I just feel like I'm going to pitch you these 2 scenarios, and you tell me which one's more believable right now. That the Bengals, with everything they've shown you this year, can figure out a way to win a game against a division rival on Monday night. Or the Steelers, with everything they've shown you, can suddenly put it all together and win a game on Monday night against a division rival. Out of those 2 scenarios, I feel like the Bengals putting it together feels more plausible. Because I've watched 3 Bengals games and I've seen them come close in both games. And almost have wins. You can see it. It's almost there. But with the Steelers, they just look so far gone and so lost right now that if they just suddenly put it all together, it would stun me. And that's why I have the Bengals winning this one. I think the Bengals get their first win of the season and the Steelers fall to 0-4. I just can't see them just suddenly clicking. If that makes any sense. I just don't see it. They have way too many problems. And what really sucks for Steelers fans is that this season might end up with, a top 10 draft pick. But you're not getting that top 10 draft pick. The worse the Pittsburgh Steelers perform, the better it is for the Dolphins who own their draft pick. And that's what really sucks for Steelers fans. They don't even get a reward for being this bad. They just have to suffer. And that sucks for them. All right, and that's our entire Week 4 preview for the NFLandU podcast. Next time we talk, it's gonna be Tuesday. We're gonna recap all these games we just previewed, and then we'll talk about any news that's happened since then. But like I said, it's a real mixed bag of NFL action this week. Some defensive slugfests, some cornered animal games, and maybe an offensive showcase in New York with the Giants and Washington football team. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's 2 teams on a bye week this week, the Jets and 49ers. That's why we didn't talk about them this week on Friday. And the Jets need all the time off they can get to try and figure things out offensively. Maybe Sam Darnold comes back next week. Who knows? Against the Eagles. We'll see. All right, anyway, that's all for the NFLandU podcast. I guess we'll see you guys Tuesday. Bye.